you can't just go surfing. You have to exercise. You have to move weights, and you have to move, of course, properly. There's so much imbalance in surfing, you have to keep the system balanced. I'm never going to tell a surfer to put their hand in the water. The reason my hand touches the water is because I'm compressing so much.
All right, welcome to the Basis Surf Podcast. Very excited. We got Kahea Hart. He trained Brissa Hennessy as she was getting ready for the Olympics at Chopu. Trained Billy Kemper. I know he's trained a ton of different pros, but also works with a lot of everyday surfers as well. He's a former competitive surfer, qualified for the Pipe Masters. Probably one of the most ripped dudes that I've ever seen as well. For your age, how old are you now? I'm sorry if I'm asking this, but
January, I'll be 53.
Oh man, I hope I look like you when I'm 53. All right, so you're gonna have to share some secrets.
So you got the right genes. You got the right genes.
Yeah, no, I don't know, man. I think you look more ripped than most 25-year-olds. So all right, we're gonna have to get into some secrets on that. But you also rip as well. So this is gonna be a very interesting podcast. I want to get into how you trained top elite athletes, how you work with your everyday surfer clients as well. And then just how you stay healthy and how you stay fit with all that training you do. So we're going to get into a ton of it. But I guess the first thing I wanted to dive into, just because this is actually when I think I reached out to you, because I was watching the Olympics, and I was watching that heat that Brissa was in, and it was just such a bummer because it just seems like the waves didn't materialize for her. I remember seeing you on your board just waiting, and I would imagine that was probably one of the most intense hair-raising events for you as a coach, just waiting for the waves. And then she got that one wave, and it would have been just the perfect wave, and she just got caught a little bit. I mean, tell me, what was it like, being at the Olympics in that event, coaching Brissa? What was that like?
Well, the Olympics is a lot different from a regular WCT event. I was actually at the WCT, or I was prepping her for the WCT event that she placed second for a month in advance from the Olympics. And your atmosphere at a WSL event is everybody's cheering. There's more boats around, and at the Olympics, they block it off. There's a lot of security. You got to have a badge. You got to have access to here and there, and very limited open to the public. They had a little raffle system for the public to win tickets to get on a boat to come and watch it. There's not much. It's quiet. It's, and kind of I think that's how it is, at the other Olympics, when people are ice skating or doing their gymnastics routine, it's pretty quiet. Nobody's rah, a huge cheer, so it's very, very different. And, sitting in the channel there, it's pretty nerve-wracking, hoping for where there's waves coming, and they had to run. It was the last day of the waiting period, and and that's the nature of surfing, right? Recently saw another podcast with Kelly talking about the Olympics, and he had a pretty good idea where eventually it kind of has to go into a wave pool, because if you look at surfing or every other Olympic sport, it's a controlled environment, right? And surfing is not a controlled environment. But one thing that really stuck out that Kelly had mentioned, if and when it does go into a wave pool, each run is compulsory. This wave, you need to check off these boxes, right? And that lets you get that score. Then your next wave, the boxes, the degree of difficulty on the boxes gets checked off even higher, right? And then that's how you get guys to advance. We'll see if that ever happens, right? Because in the ocean, you don't have that ability. You're at the mercy of Mother Nature and what she gives you, and it's a lot of chance and luck, right? And the weird thing is that at the Olympics, they held off all morning. I can't remember what time they had started, but had they waited a little bit longer, and since it's the Olympics and it's Tahiti, there's no cutoff time. They could run till dark, right? Had they waited about an hour and a half more, because once everything was wrapped up, you're standing on the beach, they're running, they're, you know, handing out silver medals, gold medals, and the waves, it's still slow, but now it's 4 foot. And when the sets come, there's like 3 or 4 waves, and it's still the sun's not setting yet. So they could have waited a little longer, but you don't know.
It's always such a gamble. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that must be really tough. I mean, I was so looking forward to the drama of, you know, seeing proper Teopu.
It would have been, well, there was the drama the big day,
in the
right?
beginning.
With the men's.
Right.
Well, the women's had that one day that was pretty good, and then the men's day, they were gonna continue running, but we knew the wind was coming, and they had called the girls on. Annette Layler, Team Israel, she was getting ready. She's come to my camps, and I've worked with her before. She was the next heat up after, was that Connor O'Leary, and I can't remember who else was in that heat, but she was ready and she was going, you know. It's like, and it was gnarly. It was pretty west, but it's like, you know, if it's game time, it's game time. But the wind blew out, and unfortunately, I guess a lot of the and it's been heard around the world already, or said in a lot of podcasts, is like the biggest thing that came out of that day was Gabriel's kick out.
Right, you know? That one photo.
Yeah, and that's not even serving, you know. The barrel was actually gnarlier than the kick out, and the kick out was heard around the world.
Well, you know, non-surfers just look at that, you know, that's obviously the thing that sticks out, but you know, that's to be expected. It's very much like an Instagram kind of moment. So
well, media, right? Just the whole media, whether it's social media or even TVs and newspapers.
Right. So, you know, obviously you didn't know what exactly the conditions were going to be like. So I'm curious, what went into that training when you were gearing up for the Olympics and the event?
Well, you know, there's training in the water, and they had scheduled times for each athlete, right? They broke everybody up. I think the first day was like maybe 9 people in the water, nine different people. You know, sometimes it was actually by teams, but Brisa was the only one representing Costa Rica. So the first day, I think she surfed with the Brazil team, and Costa Rica, Peru was in there as well. And then a few days, 1 or 2 days like that. And then it went to, I think, 12 people in the water and a little bit longer session. So that was your training in the water, and just, you know, waves weren't that great. Just getting comfortable, you know, because you got to be ready for any type of situation, you know. And what I would tell her is, you know, it's like, we're not necessarily trying to get the best wave in these training sessions in the water. You're just trying to, you know, get familiar. Where's the lineup? Well, if that guy got a good one, where did he get it from? And place yourself off of that. Just like, you know, the average surfer, if you see somebody get a good wave, you know, where was that? And then try and line it up on land. The only thing lining up things out at Chopo, it's so far away from land. You've got the scaffolding. You've got certain cracks in the reef you can look at, you know, to line yourself up. And then on land, you know, since we were already in an event, and I've worked with Brisa the year that she won the Sunset event here on Oahu. She had been in the gym 3 days a week and just hitting the barbell, just basic strength, and not lots of repetitions, basically deadlifting or squatting the barbell. I think picking that barbell up probably a total of 16 times, just maintaining strength. And then with a lot of mobility. So while we were on the road in Tahiti, lots of foundation training, which is a game changer. We'll get into more of that in a bit, but a lot of the CT surfers and myself, it's the game changer. You know, you can get out of pain, you can reset your body. We did a lot of foundation training before every workout, and then the workouts were depending kind of what and where we were in the waiting period. She was moving sandbags and kettlebells, plyometric stuff, just staying on her feet and staying balanced, you know. Nothing really intense or heavy, because we are getting into event. If we knew we had a few days off, that day we knew it's off, go a little harder, right? Keep her on her toes. A lot of balance stuff on the stability balls, and that's kind of what we hit. And then just keeping her in the water as much as you
Yeah. How
can.
much? So I guess what is the intention with all this physical training? Is it just to keep them in peak physical shape? Is it a mental thing as well? Like how, or are you trying to get them stronger? Obviously mobility is an issue because I'm
Mhm.
sure that they have overuse issues. Like, how do you think about it when you're dealing with like these elite athletes?
That's exactly it. You got to think about, and this goes for every surfer, right? Especially those young surfers who have grown up on a surfboard. If there's these young kids that are growing up on surfboards, they've got unbelievable imbalances, right? Their lead leg, their front leg knows how to hinge and load that hamstring and glute, where the back leg only knows how to rotate. It does know how to hinge, but it doesn't know how to load and access that glute and hamstring connection. And getting, for these athletes, high level athletes, and like somebody like myself and an average surfer, muscle is the organ of longevity. Okay. And keeping yourself balanced and muscles pulling and working together, balanced in a balanced way, keeps you moving better, right? The biggest thing is there's so much imbalance in surfing, you have to keep the system balanced. And that was myself when I was a young athlete. Though I was already training, and the guys that I looked up to who were training were Sonny Garcia and Todd Chesser. And those guys were moving weights. And it's like, okay, well, that's what we're going to do. And we started doing that. And it typically for a lot of these athletes, and luckily Brisa hasn't been there, but a lot of these young surf athletes, it takes an injury to really make them go, oh, wow, I need to start training. And for myself, I blew out my ACL, wiped out at pipe. My foot hit the reef, but my body kept going. So I tore my ACL on my right leg. And that was the point where, okay, after I did all the rehab, I got a trainer and started training properly. And then from there, I just kept doing it. And I haven't stopped doing it. And it keeps me at the level I'm at. And that's the biggest thing I see with older surfers, right? You can't just go surfing. You have to exercise. You have to move weights, and you have to move, of course, properly, right? So keeping those athletes, even while, all the athletes there were doing workouts at the Olympics. Medina, Griffin, everybody's got their little programs, right? And you're just keeping the body active rather than just sitting around. What is modern man doing most of the time? And this is not very good for you.
Hey everyone, my name is Van, and I'm an everyday surfer that's just obsessed with improving. And I wanted to take everything that I've learned, everything that I've struggled with, all the mistakes that I've learned along the way, and share it with you to help you become the best surfer that you can be. And I'm super lucky on this podcast, I get to interview the world's top pros, shapers, coaches, and take you along on my journey as I try to learn, uncover all the gold so you can apply to your own surfing. So hopefully you're going to get some value out of this. And the best way you can support me is just simply by sharing this podcast with whoever else you think may benefit from it. I also have been working really hard for a long time on something that I think is going to help a ton of people. I know that it was a game changer for myself as well. But more to come on that over the next coming months. I'm super excited. Thank you for all the support. And for those of you just joining for the first time, welcome to the Basis community. Super stoked to have you. Right. So I'm curious, and that makes complete sense, right? So there's the preventative side of things where you're trying to optimize for imbalances. And I'm curious to what extent it's mainly driven to keep the body limber, obviously enhance performance to an extent, but it seems a lot of it is focused towards just like avoiding overuse, because that can become such a problem in surfing. Yes. How much do you lean into weight training and all of this as like enhancement so you can push harder as well? Because you'll see guys like Italo going like ham, just going nuts with like squats and all sorts of dynamic lifts. Like, is that an aspect as well? Do you recommend that for most athletes? How do you think about kind of this more aggressive form of training that seems more about not just imbalance, but like enhancement?
There is a time for it. And what Italo is training for, that's when he's doing those Olympic lifts, it's power, right? And power, when you're doing power, you're not lifting heavy loads. It's not extremely heavy. It's heavy, but you're moving that load fast. And that's great. It's great for power, you know, and there's a time and a place for it. For example, the program that I have my athletes in the gym right now is, you know, it's preseason or it's off season. You know, North Shore hasn't really kicked in. We had a swell the last few days, but we're on a strength and hypertrophy program for 8 weeks. We are lifting mostly dumbbells, you know, and I almost need to get bigger dumbbells. Everybody's looking, okay, wait, where's the 40s? Where's the 35s? You know, and I've only got a set of one of each, and guys are moving up and just get really strong. And that program should end around October 8th. And then we'll really get into more movement and power, and also maintaining strength, not lifting as much volume, but you'll still be pushing some weight, but a lot more movement, a lot more cardio, and just having a good balance, you know. What Italo does, and I've seen him here on the North Shore, and, you know, and my good friend is his coach, Reynos Hayes, and Reynos is like, hey, where should we put him? What gym should he go to? You know, and he ended up just driving up to 24-hour fitness, so he had access to everything. And no, it's all types of training are right. I mean, for the everyday person, just basic strength training. You don't have to do CrossFit. Just push, pull, hinge, right? Upper body push and pull, lower body push and pull, hinge. Right. Very essential. Not just the surfing, to life.
Right. For sure. Huh. That's interesting. And what's interesting about your approach with these elite athletes as well is it sounds like you have this very thoughtful, periodized training program where, you know, you have different phases, you're leading into the season, and that makes a lot of sense, right? And then I'm sure during the season, probably you drop the power a little bit, you drop the strength a little bit, just so they can focus on surfing, and then it's more about injury prevention. Or how do you think about it? Well,
what we do here is preseason. We're in here 4 days a week. It used to be 5 days a week, but I found I'm the oldest guy in the crew, and I found we were doing 5 days a week. I was getting injured. I wasn't necessarily getting injured in the gym, but something we'd be really nagging a lot after surfing and stuff. So we pulled it back down. Preseason, we're 4 days a week. And then in season, we're 3 days a week, where one day will be more conditioning, doing cardio. And the other 2 days are basic strength. You're picking up that barbell about 16 times while we're in here. And that's it. Just maintaining that strength. And
got it.
The rep ranges is like, for example, it's 2 rounds of 5 repetitions. And then the next series is 3 rounds of only 2 repetitions.
Okay, so pretty low on the rep range, and definitely more strength oriented.
But you can load though. It's only 2 reps, so you can go pretty high, right?
Right.
Keeping that strength.
Got it. Makes sense. Interesting. And so this is like, so we've gotten pretty deep, and this is fascinating. I love nerding out on this kind of stuff. You know, it's always interesting to think about, okay, how do the elite pros, you know, train? And then obviously how does it trickle down, you know, if you're just a recreational everyday surfer? But the other question I had, especially for a wave, you know, a heavy wave like Chopu, is, you know, how important was, or how much training did you do in terms of paddling? Because I remember Nathan Hedge, he got that wild card in, and he was like, I was training, the main thing I was training was just paddling, because you just got to get into the wave. So, I mean, how important is paddling for a wave like Chopu, and do you do training for that? Do you have your athletes like, just, all right, you got to go paddle for a mile or whatever it is, or how do you think about that?
So prior, Brisa and I we met in Tahiti about 2 weeks prior to the WSL event. And she 2 years prior she placed second, but it wasn't real chopes. It didn't get really good. It was okay. And at that event, she was kind of the only female who kind of got barreled. And leading up to the WSL event, the whole goal was getting her to grab rail, because she spent so much time in Fiji where she can roll in, bottom turn, and then grab her rail. And then, of course, during the WSL event, she wasn't grabbing the rail. But prior, if you go and watch her YouTube series about leading up to the WSL event, man, she went over the falls, she wiped out, and she just went for it. In the paddling aspect, for a wave like Chopo, you're not riding your same surfboard. You're adding a little more volume up in the nose as well, so you can paddle. One of the drills that I did with Brisa on the leading up to the Olympics is I've got blood flow restriction bands, and put those on her and had her do like paddle sprints. And while I held onto her leash, paddle 30 seconds, take the bands off, let the blood flow back in, relax, shake it off, rest for a minute, put them back on, 30-second sprint. Her arms were cooked. But it's just getting that speed and paddle, it's and having the right boards, that's super key out there. I even myself, when I was down there for the WSL, I had boards that I just had here from Hawaii and Pipeline. And I went down there, caught a few waves, and then when I came back, I redesigned my boards. I went, hey, I want to put a little more up in the nose, under my chest, and they worked great when I went back. It felt way better. And I even went off by looking at, when I was there, look at what the WSL riders were riding, as while I'm sitting on the beach or looking at the boats and stuff. And Gabriella Bryan, she was riding 2.5 on her 6.2. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that.
Interesting. So it sounds like you did some paddle training with Brissa, but you're probably also factoring in she's spending like, I don't know, how many hours a day does she spend in the water typically, like leading up to this?
Only about an hour and a half.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And also in for a wave like Chopo, you're not just paddling, you're kicking too. And that's something that a lot of lower level surfers aren't doing. They'll do it right as the wave picks them up. But if you can kick and paddle, especially if you're surfing a wave that's actually moving at a high velocity, right? California and New York, the waves kind of roll. But even if you want to catch those waves, if the minute you decide and you're positioned, if you're kicking and paddling, you want to match the speed of the wave. It's like jumping onto a moving car, right? You want to be able to catch that car or catch that train, and you got to be moving fast.
For sure. And I mean, but she is still consistently surfing a ton. But let's say, I'm sure you have everyday surfers, weekend warriors that, don't get to surf as frequently as, hour and a half every day. How important is paddling for them?
Very important. I mean, you're doing more paddling than surfing, right? And something you can do in the gym is rows, pull-ups, chin-ups. I prefer to give those people who surf a lot, I prefer to give them chin-ups, because already in surfing, you've got this internal rotation paddling, right? And then if you go into a pull-up, you've got that same internal rotation. So if we go into a chin-up, we've got external rotation.
Interesting.
To counter all that internal rotation of paddling a surfboard. And you're still going to hit those lats, right? The pull-up, the chin-up should start at the lat rather than at the bicep.
Right. Interesting. Now, do you think a surfer can train only with pull-ups? Do you think that that's effective? Because I'm sure that there's people in the audience who don't get to surf a bunch and they're like, can I just train using pull-ups?
It's not going to, you have to be able to paddle. Yeah. You could lay on a ball. There's things on YouTube. You could lay on a stability ball, grab the bands with your hands and pull. You could do straight down, or you could pull like a paddle. Same thing. Yep. Kind of the same thing, but it's not going to be that full stroke through, right? But that's your answer to that. If you're not able to get into the water,
Right.
You
It's
should
better
be
than
doing
nothing.
a lot of those.
Right. Right. Interesting. Okay. So, you touched earlier on how important foundation training was, right? In terms of correcting a lot of the issues that your athletes had. I mean, I remember that's actually what, what was it exactly? Billy Kemper was just talking about how training with you was like, you basically saved his life in a lot of ways. Like his body
Yeah.
was broken. I think he was coming back from some injury and he was totally wrecked. And then he started training with you and you totally transformed him. And he talked about how important foundation training was as well. So just tell us a little bit about, what was it like working with Billy, and then kind of what was the work that you did with him that was able to turn his body around. And I think he came back and he was going harder than ever. So.
Yeah, well, Billy's got a great doctor that he works with as well, Dr. Massey in San Jose, stem cells and PRP and all the right stuff, which really helps with his recovery. Foundation training was created by Dr. Eric Goodman, basically to get Eric out of pain. If you see an MRI of Eric's spine, he's got 6 degenerative discs. And they wanted to put a rod in him to fix him. And this is when he was studying to be a chiropractor. Basically, he went on a journey of doing yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi, and continuing to study his chiropractic stuff. And he started formulating these positions, which got him out of pain. And he started sharing it with people, and it got him out of pain. Basically, what your body is a bunch of pulley systems, right, and levers. And what tends to happen with all these pains, we have actual traumas where Billy's had traumas and injuries, right? Or you just have those imbalances that start to pull and low back goes out. But a lot of the times, if your low back goes out, it's not necessarily your low back. What Eric says is wherever the pain is located, unless it's a trauma, it usually is coming from above or below that area because of some imbalance. So with foundation training, for example, like Billy coming off an injury, there's going to be atrophy on one side. And doing foundation training really helps you recruit all those muscles, because I'm sure you've seen it. It looks a little weird, but it's an isometric strength exercise. You're squeezing your fingers, you're squeezing your lats, you're squeezing the floor, you're grabbing the floor with the 3 points of contact on your feet, right? You're not grabbing with your toes, you're grabbing with the pads of your feet. And then you're breathing as big as you can. You're making a whole kinetic chain connection so that you can just feel better and get things to balance out. And it's happened with me, that's why I keep doing it. It makes me feel better. If I got a little twinge or something here, if I do a few of the poses, it works. And it's a game changer, to the point where it's not just Billy. A lot of the guys on the top guys in the WSL are doing it. Jordy does it. Griffin, Jack Robinson, it helps you, I guess, counter all that rotation that you're doing surfing. And it helps not just surfers, every human's got imbalances, right? Sitting in a chair. I usually don't sit in a chair. I'm at my desk right now. I got a stand-up desk. I'm here, right? I'm not going to, that feels a lot better after sitting for a few minutes there.
I got it. Makes sense. Yeah. And so, I mean, I can totally see it, right? So many surfers, I have so many buddies, and I suffer from myself. I have hip issues. I don't have lower back issues, but I have tons of friends with lower back issues, and it seems kind of crazy, because you just look at the pose and you're like, that does all of that from what you say, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of crazy, but I mean, I do also see what you're talking about, and I've experimented with it a little bit. I remember I tweaked something and it definitely gave me some relief, but obviously I was just looking up videos on YouTube. I didn't really get a proper practitioner to show me how it was done. And it was very interesting though. And I think if I was in a lot, yeah.
Look, the key to it is just consistency, right? It's like any program, just like training program, or even, improving your surfing. It's consistency, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the more you do it, the better you feel. And it changes a lot of things, and it makes people more aware of where their bodies are. And that's what, do you have kids or friends who have kids?
Yeah, I have friends that have kids. Yeah.
You've seen a toddler. How does a toddler move, right? Step back. When a toddler sees something on the ground, they walk over and they go here to get it.
Right.
Oh, somebody your age, what are they doing?
Yep.
Right? Using their spine rather than their hips. We're designed to move at the hips. The hip is the biggest joint that creates the most power and can take power, right? Create power and take power. And that's like all your, you said you had a lot of friends who've got low back pain and stuff. And it's because most likely the hips and glutes are too tight. And they're using their spines rather than their hips.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a common problem. I mean, especially when you just sit in a chair all day and you're not active, it just atrophies everything. Everything gets tight. Everything gets thrown out of whack. And then, you're trying to surf and you're just like, you're trying to get low on the board and you're just feeling it all over the place. And
exactly.
It's a big struggle.
That's the biggest thing. I think you, in the questions there, you would ask, for those guys who are getting older, and like when I was in Manhattan Beach working with some young kids a few years back, waves, it was actually good Manhattan Beach. It was in October. There was a little bit of swell. And there's a lot of older guys out there who surf pretty well. But the one thing they weren't doing is they weren't getting low anymore.
Yeah.
Because they've lost that ability. You have to maintain that ability to get low and get up, get down, compress, that whole compression using the hips. And a lot of the times surfers will have older surfers have hip and knee problems because they're trying to surf out of their knees rather than out of their hips.
Right. Completely. And then you probably, you have issues with your pop-up. It's hard to get your knees underneath you. All these, it's just this cascading.
Because you've been sitting in this position, which I'm not going to sit anymore. I'm going to stand up.
Sitting's the new cigarettes, right?
Yeah. The human body, Eric Goodman from Foundation Training, the human body, he said the human body is meant to sit 20 minutes a day. Right. If you think about primitive man, they weren't sitting, and if they were sitting, they weren't really going to, they had naked butts. They weren't sitting on hard rocks. They were squatting.
Right. And which is actually probably good for your spine and all that, because you're getting into that deep position. So let's transition then and talk more about your work with everyday surfers. I'm sure you see all sorts of different skill levels. You're not only training, the elite pros, but just your everyday guys as well and gals. So what are some of the more common mistakes that you see? Because I know you do a lot of technique coaching as well, in addition to the physical training. But what are some of the things that you see that you wish you could call out more and help people out with?
Well, there's the laundry list. You've got equipment. First off, right? The surf industry has told everybody, wow, you can ride this board 3 inches shorter than your regular board because it's got this much volume, right? And you've heard that one before, as well as fin size. I don't go by what's on the package. I go by myself. I used to ride medium fins because that's what it said on the package. I ride larges. They feel great.
Right.
Billy, he rides larges, but he's got a custom one that's a little bit bigger. It's kind of an extra large fin, right?
You just want more drive?
Yeah. Well, what do you got to do to get more drive? A little bit bigger fin, but you got to use your hips. That leads to what other mistakes is surfers surfing out of their ankles and toes, right? If I'm going to work with an everyday surfer, I'm never going to cue them to lean on their toe edge or lean on their heel edge. Surfing's not a leaning thing, right? It's compression and rotation. What else do I see?
So I guess, so on that point though, maybe if you could just clarify a little bit more, right? So let's say you're coaching somebody through, let's say a bottom turn, they're doing their front side bottom turn, and you're saying, so what cue would you give them? You say you don't want them to lean, you don't want them. How do you give that instruction
So
then,
I'll give you my whole spiel here is you have to think of biomechanics, okay? How do we run? Opposite hand, opposite leg. Okay? So you want to create, in a bottom turn, you want to create a pivot point. Front side, regular foot front side, that'll be your backhand. Create a pivot point. What do you have to do to create a pivot point? You can't bend over at your waist. You need to compress. Right? Then from there, and if your eyes have to be looking where you're going, and from something that I heard Ben Ipa say years ago, is you need to imagine there's a string from your front arm to the nose of your board. That's where you're going. Also, what you need to understand is the rocker. What is the rocker for? You ask people, they don't know. They think it's for so you don't purl. What's the rocker for, Ben?
Right. So you put the board on rail, and then, the board will turn according to that rocker and to fit into the curve of the wave.
There's your answer. Rocker is meant to fit into the curve of the wave. But if you turn that rocker over on land, so the fins are facing up, and you step on it lightly with your foot, what does that rocker do? It flexes.
Yeah.
So, front side, bottom turn. Create a pivot point. When you create that pivot point with compression, you're also creating force against that rocker. Now, you need to direct that force where you want to go, but you also need to maintain that force, right? So the cueing of somebody saying, oh yeah, get low, compress, and then push on your toes. Well, if you push on your toes, you're going to go here. How about you create the pivot point, create force. For every action, you see that back arm swing? For every action, there needs to be a reaction, directing that force exactly where you want to go. Now that you've directed that force, now you have leverage. But now the key thing is as you go into a turn, you need to maintain compression. So at the apex of every turn, whether it's a snap or a roundhouse cutback, the distance between your chest and knees needs to close. Because it's, again, compression, right? I'm never going to tell somebody to push their surfboard. The push comes with compression, right?
Interesting.
So from there, right, your front hand should be leading where you're going. Of course, eyes, head, shoulders, hips, front arm are leading. Now, another big mistake, and I've been meaning to do this edit. I had a client the other day, but I've got so many clients that I can't get in and do the edit that I need to do. He's been surfing since he was a kid, in the 6 foot, maybe a little bit 6 foot plus range. He can get up, he can ride a wave, he can do a cutback, he can kind of hit the lip, but a lot of the times when he goes for a cutback, he's dropping and pointing his front hand in the water. I know it's all over the internet. Yeah, put your hand in water. I'm never going to tell a surfer, whether it's a young up-and-coming surfer, to put their hand in the water. The reason you see the professional surfers, for myself, I never think put my hand in the water. I'm thinking I'm pulling this front arm where I want to go. The reason my hand touches the water is because I'm compressing so much. So it's not reach for the water. Because you'll see the young surfers, and this guy that I'm talking about, he comes off the bottom and then puts his hand here and boom, tips over.
Right.
We went back the next day. We reviewed the video. I said, hey, don't reach for the water. Touch the water, create the pivot point, reach where you want to go, create that leverage, and direct and reach your front hand where you want to go. He still does this because he's seen this on the internet, right? His roundhouse was way better. Now, to debunk this, right? Which hand is closest to where you're going? This backhand or your front hand?
Yeah, the front hand.
Front hand. You're not. And biomechanically, if this arm comes across your body, that front leg, right? This right hand is connected to your front leg. That front leg is going to lock out and straighten. And then the inside rail will come out of the water.
Right. You're talking about reaching all the way over. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. And that would cause you to over rotate and throw you off.
Exactly. Right? My goal is to try and simplify surfing. Because there's a lot of stuff out there. People, they see what the pros do and they're trying to explain what they're doing, but it's kind of not it. Right? It is, but it isn't. There's a certain nuance to it, right? So guys, where I got a lot of my information was I hung out with Gerlach. We both had long hair. He had those the carve boards that him and his dad designed. Those are amazing.
Yeah.
The newer skates, the Carver, Smooth Star, they're good, but you can start a lot of bad habits with those things, right? Where does it pivot? It pivots on the nose. That's the surfboard pivots. Where does the surfboard pivot? The midpoint. The midpoint of the surfboard is the pivot point. Even if you blow the tail, though, say this is my surfboard, right where my thumb is, that's the midpoint. If I'm going to blow the tail, midpoint's still in the water.
Yeah. Right?
Midpoint always, if you're going to blow the tail, that midpoint has to stay in the water. Roundhouse cutback, midpoint's in the water. So it's a very, that's why Gerlach's boards, they go on rail. They go here. As where any other surf skate goes on the nose here.
Yeah. Well, that's always been my issue with the surf skates as well, is that the way they turn isn't exactly kind of proper, right?
Well, Gerlach's supposed to be moving back to the U.S., and he's going to start back the carve boards. I really hope he does. The only thing is the carve board isn't as user-friendly. You've got to there has to be some instructions with it. Right? It's a lot harder to use. It probably... Go ahead.
No, I'm saying, but hopefully in a good way that actually forces you to surf like you're surfing, right?
You have to have good surf mechanics on a carve board. Because I'll take kids or even a regular surfer like the guy I was talking earlier, put him on the carve board, Gerlach's board, and the first thing he's doing, he's leaning and he's going, oh, whoa, I fell over. Because he didn't compress into the turn as what you should do on a surfboard, right?
Right.
So back to other things that I see is front hand in the water. That's kind of hit it all. You know, there's a lot more to it, right? Than what you see. Those guys and like that whole surfboard industry of you can ride this board shorter. This is what John. You're not John, right? And I think on your podcast you've talked about ride a little bit longer board. You know, I had a client come to me. He's 6 foot. Came to me with a 5'10" Paizel White Tiger. And we went out, the waves were this big. He wasn't going anywhere. He'd get up, wiggle, and go for a turn and just sink. And I just asked him, do you have a bigger board? Oh yeah, I've got a 6'2". I'm like, perfect, bring that next time. Oh, what? No. And I don't know if it was his girlfriend or just the girl that had come with us that day to the beach. She's like, oh no, he likes the Paizel because it's cool. You know?
Right.
And I had to fight the guy. I took like, dude, bring the 6'2". Bring the 6'2". Finally he brought it, and now he's doing full turns. You know?
Oh, that's sick.
And it's like all these people come to me with these tiny boards because it has this much liters and it's easy to turn. Well, if the board is really easy to turn and your skill level's not there, it's not happening, right?
Right. So that's so true, and I talk about that a lot. What are we'll do one more little piece of advice, and then I have a couple closing questions for you. But
Mm-hmm.
any other big unlocks, little tips that you've given to some of your clients that really helped them kind of take it to the next level, or maybe with some of the pros that you've trained with and you coach with? I mean, you sent me a whole laundry list, Griffin
Mm-hmm.
and Tatiana and Aaron Brooks, like all these, like, and I'm sure coaching at that elite level, it's so much of surfing seems like advanced basics, and it's like just like little tweaks here. So maybe with the everyday surfer, you're going to see these bigger drastic changes. But any other tips that you would mind sharing, that you've seen have a big impact?
Big impact is, like I said, the pivot point, right? So your front foot basically needs to be, depending on the how the board is built, your front foot kind of needs to be just in front of that pivot point. Because then if it's just in front of that pivot point, you'll see guys, they're surfing pretty good, but the board is always kind of like doing a wheelie. If they move that foot, if their foot is here and they just move it a half step forward, you'll see that board lay down and go. And like, wow, whoa, my board works so good now because you're in the right position. Another one for the average, big one is of course, you get into it about reading the waves and positioning, but a lot of, average surfers, they'll, okay, I'm in position, and then they'll start paddling, they'll look, but they're looking back at the wave coming towards them down the line. But which way do you need to go? We're going that way, right? You do need to look back, but they tend to look back too long. And then by the time the wave's picking up, they're looking this way, and wait, the section's either gone or it's already standing up, where you need to look back here, and then you got to look there and go, where am I? Put myself in position to ride that. That's a big one, is like almost either looking too long or not looking at all, just turning around and going, right? That's kind of the biggest one. It's like and then that's time, and that's time and being able to read the wave and then know where to be. And then how do you fix that? Get on a bigger board, right? Yeah, so you don't have to take off here, right? I had a guy, he came to me, could ride waves, nothing spectacular, get up, catch waves. But he was I want to say he was like 5'4" and trying to ride like a 5'8", and kind of struggled getting up or just timing and getting up. I said, do you own a soft top? He's like, yeah. I said, okay, next time we get together, bring your wave storm. We're going to meet at Puena Point, which is kind of like a longboard area. It stands up out the back, but it'll roll all the way through. Let's meet there and let's do this. And he could get in earlier. He could read the waves. He could get from A to B where he needed to be on the wave. And I said, look, for the next month, only ride this, and you'll do way better. He did it for a month, and then he got back to his shortboard, and he was positioning better and riding waves more. So it's just take the time. It's like, I think when I get a new client and they show up with a shortboard, and I go, okay, one of the questions I ask them is, okay, how long have you been surfing? And then how long did you ride a longboard or a learner board for? And when you rode that learner board, could you catch the wave and ride it all the way to the beach? Myself, when I was a kid, I got a hand-me-down from actually Hans Hedemann. My parents were friends with his sister and stuff. I got one of his boards. It was a single fin lightning bolt. I was probably 4 foot tall, but the board was 6'8". I'm riding it all the way to the beach, right? And that's the thing, is that era that I grew up in, they didn't have, boards were getting shorter and shorter, but you had to learn to ride the bigger board. Yeah. So that's kind of the big things. And like I said, you'd asked earlier, is like for older surfers, is you have to keep moving. And if you want to keep moving well, learn some foundation training. Learn it. It's a game changer. They've even just started a program for the elderly, right? And I've worked with people who are older, and I get them doing foundation, in their 60s, and they're like, wow, I feel I can move. I I can get up,
That's
I can get
awesome.
down. You know, it's super important, especially for those guys who want to keep surfing as they get
Right.
older. And
Yeah.
then lastly, for those guys who can surf and want to keep surfing at their level that they're at, come to my surf camps. I'm going to be doing a camp I've done one in Mexico. I'll do one again in Mexico next year, but I'm also going to do one in Samoa.
That sounds like a fun trip.
Yeah. It'll be on my Instagram once it's all ready. It'll be ready in a couple of weeks, and we'll launch it.
Sweet. And what's your Instagram handle, just so everybody can find it again?
Hawaii Surf and Performance.
All right, Hawaii Surf and Performance. Nice. I got 3 more questions for you. So I was talking to Philippe Malveau, who's, Hurley team manager, and he was having a conversation with Philippe Toledo, and he was asking, like, Philippe, what is your intention when you're surfing a wave? What goes through your head? So what goes through your head when you surf a wave? What's your intention?
My intention is to smash the lip and do as big a turn as I can, right? And you have to have speed, maintain speed, but I'm not just trying to go, as per Philippe's answer, go as fast as he can. Well, he's going fast as he can through those turns. After this, go and play his highlight reel of whatever the last title that he won. He's basically touching and reaching on almost every single turn. He's touching the water, his front hand's coming forward, and he's carrying. He's never coming up into full extension. You're always maintaining that force. And basically, for me to smash and do big turns every time, what's going through my head? Create a pivot point, reach my hand exactly where I want to go. And I think the biggest thing here, another big thing on technique, is people they'll get it. They'll get up towards the lip, and then what are they trying to turn with? This isn't going to turn the board. What's the biggest joint? Once you're connecting that front foot, right as that front foot gets up to the section where you want to turn, what has to turn? Hands come up, hips need to turn, because that's where all your force is going to be. Boom, right? And that's the biggest fault, is people come up and they drop this hand. It can be done, but if it's done this way, when the board comes back down, they've got to come back to counterbalance. So it's a lot of body mechanics, right? It's like hand up and then hips take over.
Fascinating. That's interesting. I've never heard anybody. Well, yeah, I've definitely heard people talk about the hips, but it's interesting. The way you described that to me just made something click, though.
So then like go and watch those guys fanning anybody. When the hands come up, hips take over. Back leg, if these are my feet, back leg is going to extend or push the tail. Front leg is going to pull the board under, and then the chests are going to come to the knees. There's always, as that turn goes through, it's an extension of the back leg, but a compression at the same time.
Right. I mean, so much of surf tips is like, it's with the hands and you're just like throwing your arms around, but you totally see surfers that are disconnected. They're throwing their hands around. They're not turning.
Yep.
And obviously the hips are the key, because that's what controls the weight that goes through your legs and into the board, that controls where you're going to go. Right. And so, I like that.
Think of it this way: about it. Head, shoulders, hips, knees, turn a surfboard. Your feet are centrating, grabbing that board and absorbing the force that you're putting through here. I'm never going to tell a surfer, push on your toes, right? Because just getting down and touching the water, that will put the board onto rail.
Yeah, I like that way of describing it. Interesting. All right, then thank you for that. If you had to surf the same wave for the rest of your life, what would it be? You don't have to name names, but like, if you have one wave, you got to surf it.
Probably just VLAN right here in front of my house, because it's got everything.
VLAN with no crowds, though.
I don't see any crowd.
That's true. You don't have to worry about the crowd there. I mean, I remember surfing there once. Oh, dude, there was like
it's gotten
100 people. Yeah,
it's gotten out of control. Like back in the day, it was a very well regulated spot, and now with times have changed. North Shore used to be kind of a wild zone. Now it's gentrified and definitely changed. It's still the country, but you've got a whole new demographic of people here, you know, and it's not as wild as it used to be.
Yeah. The time I surfed it, I remember rolling up, I saw Sterling Spencer just ripping on the inside. And then like in the middle section, it was Coco Ho and she was ripping. And then there's the uncles on the outside. And then this is when I knew, I was like, you know what? It's time for me to go in. Stephanie Gilmore rocks up, like says hi to Coco, catches one wave, and then paddles right in afterwards. And I'm just like, yeah, all right. If Stephanie Gilmore's not catching any waves, I'm definitely not catching any waves, you know? Yeah. So that was, yeah. I mean, VLAN is like a dream wave for sure. I mean, it's so epic.